Replacing a lower ball joint on a 2011 Kia Sorento. Took the lug nuts off, remove the wheel. Then we have to take the brake caliper off, the axle bolt nut. There's a cotter pin holding a nut on there for the ball joint itself on the lower control arm. We'll have to take that off. You have to get the axle out of the way, and we'll have to remove these two suspension bolts from the strut in order to get this piece out of our way so we can press out the ball joint. To remove the caliper, there are two bolts. This one here that I've already loosened. You could also take these ones off if you wanted to. It might be easy to do that for reinstallation. And then the other bolt right here that I've already loosened. Take those out. One. I have to take the pressure off the caliper. I'm using my foot to do that. There we go. Okay, so then the caliper comes off. You may have to tap it with a hammer a little bit. I've already done it, so the brake pads are loose from the rotor. So we'll take this and we'll stick the caliper up here out of the way, and we'll fasten that with a bungee cord or something so that stays up there. Next, we have to remove this bolt that is actually holding the control arm and ball joint in the bearing assembly. To do that, you come toward the front of the vehicle and you have to remove the cotter pin and that nut. Once you get the cotter pin out, then you can stick a socket on there. Use an impact to take that off. I have to hold the other side of the nut because it's spinning here. So I can't do this with one hand. So I'll have to come back when the bolt's out. This bolt was pretty seized in here. So I tapped it on this side with a hammer where there's no threads and it's conical. And that didn't work so well either. So I took the impact and turned the other side, and that worked to loosen it. And then I was able to tap this side with a hammer, and so now it comes in and out easily. To get the ball joint out, you have to turn the wheel all the way to the right. So you get easy access here, and then you take a wedge of some sort, metal wedge. You stick it in that little groove there to kind of separate the metal. It's sort of clamping on the top of the ball joint. So you just tap that a couple times. Use plenty of WD-40 or PB Blaster. And then you tap right here gently. Don't hammer on it too hard. And you'll see if it starts coming loose or not. If it doesn't, Then you stick your chisel back in here and you keep separating that until it does loosen. Okay, the axle nut on this thing is a 32 millimeter. Seems a bit loose, maybe it's standard. But this was in the axle nut kit from Untitled.
There's a crowbar.
12-point axle nut kit. Okay, with the impact gun, the socket or the nut came right off. So next we have to take these two bolts out, here and here, to remove this whole assembly. Okay, I took these two nuts off. The one bolt already came out. Take the pressure off. Should be able to wiggle that guy out, but it's not working, so we need to tap it. Still doesn't want to come out, so I'm going to have to use two hands. Alright, so as soon as these bolts came out, pulled this forward, got the CV shaft out of its hole. Now you see the ball joint start to come out. So I just need to tap gently on this while applying pressure to lift this guy up. It's still connected to the tie rod, the steering system. So we're just kind of pull this out and twist it out of the way and hang it up. I've got the brake caliper hung up with some wire. Alright, the hub assembly and the disc brake assembly are all hanging now from the strut, along with the brake caliper. The CV shafts out of the way. Now we can get to this guy, which is the bad piece. If I would recommend anything, it would be taking that disc brake off, because that thing's really heavy with the disc brake on there, so that would lighten it up. So let's move on. There's a snap ring right here around the base of the ball joint. We take that off, and then we press the ball joint out through the bottom, and then we press the new one in. So let's do it. So I took the rubber boot up so we can get to this snap ring a little easier. My pair of needle nose pliers will not fit in the holes. It would be really nice if they would, but maybe a smaller pair would, so I'm just going to use a screwdriver or the like. To try and pop that off. So I just used this little chisel here, popped it underneath and popped the ring up. My kit comes with a new snap ring, so I'm not worried about bending it. So there we go, snap ring's off. This thing's ready to be pressed out. Alright, now we're going to use this another kit, ball joint service kit. Has a bunch of different spacers and a big C-clamp, and a 15/16 socket to press this bearing out down through the bottom. And so we will use this big ring, stick it on here like so, along with this big guy on the bottom of it, so we can hold our clamp. So we stick that all together. I will need two hands again to do that, and I'll show you what it looks like. So it appears that the 15/16 socket that I was planning to use is a pinch, maybe a pinch too tall to put on there. So I'm thinking of just putting it on right like that. Okay, now we're going to loosen this, or tighten this, and press it out. It's moving. Oh, man, that's scary.
Blew up.
Just keep pushing till it's all the way out of there. And then there's your old, really loose ball joint. Okay, so now we put the new one in.
The video's on.
Okay. Now we take our new ball joint. It's real pretty, right there.
And it's my favorite color.
It's blue. So we take and we put it up through there, like so. There's the new snap ring for it. Then we set up our clamp and push it right up, back up in there. Okay. So this time we use this guy, perhaps. Yeah, that ought to fit. So we use this and this set up on top. Let's see here. Oh yeah, that'll be perfect. Okay, so to put the ball joint back on, we use this attachment. Have the ball joint inserted. The rubber kind of holds it up in there. Then you stick this guy over it. And then we use this thing like this. Okay, so it should look something like this. And then we apply force down here when we start driving this up, and it should seat itself. Alright, so the ball joint is now seated. You see there's no space in there. And we can take off the clamp now.
There we go. There we go.
Looks good, huh? It's nice and solid. You see we can barely move it with our fingers, just the way it should be. Has a nice rounded cone all the way around it. That's where your nut or your bolt goes in to the bottom of this guy and holds it in. So we're going to start putting things back together. We start with this assembly. We'll wire it, stick the bottom on this post, get that guy tapped down in there, and then start working on getting the CV shaft put in, and then push it up and insert these bolts here. Whatever you do not forget to put this clip on. So now I have to get that on after having that whole assembly put back together. I need to get this fit around the rubber, and it pushed my rubber down and made it expand like this. So do not forget the snap ring. Okay, snap ring is in place with way too much effort involved until I found this tool. So I took and got one side pushed down in here, and then the other side was up above, and I just took this guy, put it in the hole and tipped it back, and then pushed with a screwdriver on the other side, and it popped right in place. Okay, I got every bit of the axle shaft put back in, which was a bugger. But you remember you can push this control arm down still. So you see the ball joint is only half in place, so I need to tap down here to get that guy to go all the way up in this before I can put my bolt in. And then I need to start working on getting that guy twisted back around here and put back in place. Okay, now I put these bolts back in, put that bolt back in, and that nut's on. Now I just have to torque them down, put the cotter pins back in. Notice the ball joint's a little bit taller. I actually pushed the ball joint up in too far, and then this bolt would not go in, so I had to push the ball joint out a little bit and get the holes lined up, and then it slid right in. That was a trip. I just used a pry bar here and pried the whole control arm down just about 1/4 of an inch, and then the bolt slid in. Next, I have the hex nut on for the CV shaft and the washer behind it. I'll just hand tighten that until we get the wheel on, and then we'll torque this down. This torques down to, on this Kia Sorento, about 180 foot-pounds to 198 foot-pounds, based on what I read online. This guy here torques down to about 100 foot-pounds, and then these guys I'm going to do about 100 foot-pounds as well for the strut. I could not find any information online for those. And then we'll throw the caliper back on. I have some new pads to put on when we do that, and then I have to put pads on the other side. All right, so these are 3/4 inch nuts. I just used a crescent wrench on the other side, and they came loose with the impact pretty easily. This guy back here, I have the cotter pin put back in, but the nut on there is a 17 millimeter. And the head is also a 17 millimeter. This hex nut turns out to be 32 millimeter. It strangely seems to have a little bit of play, but I didn't have any trouble getting it off. And then I'll torque it back on to 180 foot-pounds, between 180 and 200. So now all I have to do is put the caliper back on. And this guy is a lot more sturdy. All right, got the brake caliper back on with fresh brake pads. Put that bolt in. Those bolts in are in tight. Got that bolt in. Put the cotter pin in. Got the castle nut put on. Just needs to be tightened when we put the wheel on. And then we have to remember to put that cotter pin in there. Put the wheel on, and then